So what is your name? What do you do?
My name is Cheyenne. I am a mother and a medical assistant, a photographer in my spare time.
Awesome. Where are you from originally, Cheyenne?
I'm born and raised in Marion, lived in Louisville, Kentucky, lived in Fairbanks, Alaska, and various other small places around Marion, now Green Camp.
What made you go to Alaska?
My best friend, her husband was in the military, and he was on a lot of trainings at one point while he was in the military. So after she had their second son, I was not in a great place, so I went and stayed with her for about 5-6 months.
Tell us a little bit about your family and how you were raised.
I had a fun childhood, honestly. My parents are the kind of parents that I strive to be. They both dealt with a lot in their life prior to having kids, and they were kids when they had me. They were 17, 18 years old. So they did the best that they could with what they had, and it took me up until I was an adult before I realized how much work they actually put into raising all of us kids, and the fact that they actually did a good job, even though all throughout my life I didn't appreciate what I had when I had it.
So you grew up in a home with both parents present then?
Oh yeah. My parents are soulmates, meant to be together.
Yeah. So how's your life now with family, friends, your career?
It's pretty good. My son is my number one priority, my best friend. My mom is basically my co-parent. She helps me raise Lucas. I honestly don't think I could do anything at all without her. I can't even start my car without calling her. She thinks it's funny. She says, as soon as your car starts, it just starts dialing my phone number. It's like an automatic thing.
Yeah. So what made you want to be a medical assistant, you said?
Yes. I originally became a phlebotomist because I'm terrified of needles. If you bring a needle towards me, I'm going to pass out. So I'm a phlebotomist, so I could draw people's blood. Thought it'd help me overcome my fear. It didn't. But when I was pregnant, I was working at PNC Bank, and my manager at the time told me that, banks, it's majority of older people because that's the routine that they're used to. So her advice to me was, you never know what people are going home to. You could be their only interaction for a whole month. So what you do in your short time with these people will either make it or break it for this person. And you could send them home to wallow in horrible ideas and thoughts for the next month until the next time they leave their house, if they ever leave their house again. And so my goal after that was always to help people. And in every interaction that I have with anybody, I try to make them smile or laugh. That way, at least for a little bit, they had a positive experience in their day.
And you do photography too?
Yes.
What kind of things you do with that?
I love boudoir. Boudoir is my stuff.
What do you like about it?
I love how women will come in at the beginning of a session and they'll be super self-conscious. They'll be like, oh, don't look at me. Like, you could tell that their self-esteem is not very high. But by the end of the session, they're so much more relaxed. I've had women cry because they just feel so empowered and confident after a session. Or when I'm even just showing them the pictures before I even get into the editing process, they're like, I never knew I could look like that. And I'm like, well, I'm so glad you get to see yourself through my eyes now because you are a beautiful human.
That's awesome. So what are some of the struggles that you've endured throughout your life that a lot of people might not know about you?
I've had a couple. My biggest one was the one that kind of set everything off was when I was 17, I was raped by a guy at a party. It was kind of my first experience. I was a very sheltered child throughout my childhood, which I'm grateful for. it was my first time ever drinking alcohol, really, smoking anything. And I was in a new place. I was in Louisville, Kentucky. I'd only been there for a couple of months. I had a couple of friends. And at that point, I was pretty desperate for friendship in any way that I could take it. And one of my friends, she had like a little get together. And we all started drinking, and I don't remember much after that. My therapist thinks I was slipped some type of roofie. But a couple of hours later, all I can remember is it was very dark. My eyes were closed, so everything was just black. And I felt this pain, and it was a pain I'd never experienced before. And I saw red, and it was like blood. And slowly I realized that where the pain was coming from, and I realized what was happening, and I opened my eyes, and I pushed him off of me, because that was how I lost my virginity. That was my first time, so it hurt. I pushed him off me. I ran upstairs. Everybody was already asleep, and I just went to sleep and didn't tell anybody.
Have you told anybody about it as far as like law enforcement or anything like that? Or
no, I didn't tell anybody. The move to Louisville wasn't exactly ideal as it was. We had to move for my dad's job, and I didn't want to make anybody feel guilty. Because moving there kind of set everything in motion. And I was very ashamed, because I felt like it was my fault, and I didn't want anyone to say, well, you were at a party, you were drinking, what did you think was going to happen? So I had a lot of guilt. I hated all of it. I didn't feel like I deserved anybody to help me or feel bad for me, because I put myself in that position, essentially.
Yeah. So do you know who the guy is?
I do not.
You didn't know who he was before that or anything like that?
No.
So it was just like a random house party then? And
kind of like it was like 10 people, very small. Wasn't a lot of people, and it was my friend's brother's friend. So it was, I don't know his name. I know he has curly hair and green eyes. And he wore DC shoes.
So how did that affect you mentally after that happened?
Afterwards, I drank a lot. It was basically my way of coping with what happened. And I went kind of in the reverse way that most people apparently go. A lot of people, they try to avoid any and all human interaction afterwards. Prior to what had happened, I was the shyest, quietest. If you even looked at me, I would turn bright red from head to toe. Like, even the tops of my feet would turn bright red. After it happened, I was extremely outgoing, very open-mouthed. I was a loudmouth. I wanted to talk to anybody and everybody. I wanted attention, and I put myself back into that position of being drunk and having sex. I put myself in that position a decent amount, because it was my way of reliving the moment, but myself being in control instead. Which it's hypersexuality. A lot of people go hypo. So that was something I had to learn. I've had to reevaluate my entire ideal of sex afterwards, because it was what was expected of me at first, and now I'm in control. I have the power. I don't have to do it anymore.
Right. So did you have like a small circle of people that you were able to talk to about it to kind of cope with it? You just kept it to yourself?
I didn't tell anybody until 2018. Sorry. It kind of really affected a lot of things in my life. I stopped drinking when I got pregnant and I had my son. I had to. More than grateful for him. It was a very, very emotionally abusive, mentally abusive relationship with his father. And then after I had him, I wasn't able to do my normal coping mechanisms anymore. And slowly I started to spiral. And I've tried to kill myself many times in my life, but this experience was different. Because like there's trying to kill yourself and still having like a little piece of yourself that like, deep down, 99% positive you're going to do it, 1% you're not going to do it. Yeah. You just need an escape. You just want to think about it and plan it, so you have that kind of an outlet. This time I had already mentally and emotionally, I had killed myself off. Yeah. The only reason I'm still here is my mom found me about 30 seconds before I pulled the trigger and took the gun away from me, and they called the police actually for a suicide attempt, and I had to go spend 7 days in a Dublin Springs, which is a mental institution. And it was while I was in there that I told everybody that I had been raped. I had been raped 7 years prior, and I hadn't known how to deal with it.
So what made you end up deciding that you were serious about killing yourself this time? Was it just the last straw with the abusive relationship and you dealing with being raped prior to that, or what?
It was a lot of things. As silly as it sounds, the straw that broke the camel's back was I was planning on cleaning out some of Lucas's toys because he was about 2.5 at the time. And I was cleaning out his toys, and I kept putting off taking them out. Because one thing about mental illness that a lot of people don't understand is the ways that it presents itself. And when I was depressed, I would stop cleaning. I'd stop taking care of myself. I was very lazy. I would just sleep all the time. And my family, and I don't want to say anything to discredit them, because they did. They loved me with everything that they could. They just weren't equipped to handle what I was going through at the time. So when I was at my lowest, there's a quote I read once that said, "I wanted to die and you were screaming at me about doing the dishes." Yeah. And that was pretty much a lot of my life. But so I was planning on going through Lucas's toys, and there was a bag of toys that someone had put in the back seat of my car. And while I was driving that day, I'd stopped, and I had to stop suddenly, and the toys spilled in my car, and that was it. That was as soon as that happened, I checked out. I took my son to my mom, and I walked back into their closet where they had a gun. I took it, and I was on my way outside when my mom found me.
So what made your mom come looking for you? Did she just have a feeling?
I think she knew. She knew I was having a bad day, but I think she just knew, because I didn't say a word. She's struggled with things in her life. She's seen things that she shouldn't have to see and been through things she shouldn't have to see. So I think some part of her knew something was happening. Yeah. And so when I walked in, I just sent Lucas to her, and I walked back, and I was on my way walking back outside, and she just knew.
And she knew about you being raped?
No.
She never knew about you being raped either?
Nobody.
So the first time you told people was actually when you went to the rehab facility?
When I told my grandma.
Yeah. So did that have any effect on you when you would go to parties afterwards, as far as, I know you said that you would drink and you would have sex just so that you could feel in control this time, but did it ever create any paranoia with you when you would go to parties and you were around people that you didn't know? No. No,
the worst had already happened to me. What could anybody else do to me at that point? Yeah. And in in the time that it was all happening, I thought I deserved it. If something did happen to me, then I deserved it because I was already dirty. I was gross. I was undeserving. So.
Well, you should be able to go to a party and have a good time without that happening to you. So you didn't deserve that at all.
Thanks.
And that doesn't make you gross. No. You didn't have any choice in the matter.
No, I don't see myself as a victim anymore. I'm a survivor. I've overcome it, and I'm a better person because of it.
Absolutely. So with the abusive relationship with your child's dad, go ahead and walk us through some of the things that would happen in that.
So he's a textbook narcissist. Yeah. I think he's a textbook narcissist. He's bipolar. And I believe he's like a borderline sociopath. While I was pregnant, when we first met, he was on probation for an OVI. So he wasn't allowed to do a whole lot. He would have to drug test every Friday. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, he was drinking and eventually started doing cocaine after I was pregnant. And all kinds of stuff. And it just got worse as he got off of papers. So he is an addict. When I was pregnant, it was mostly marijuana, which I know people cannot be addicted to it. I've smoked it before in my life. He was addicted to the high. He was always chasing a high. He had an issue with pills beforehand, before he and I had gotten together. So that was his coping mechanism to deal with things that he had going on in his life. And so it would be a lot of manipulation to the point where it would be, well, I'm going to kill myself if I don't get to go smoke this blunt.
To make you feel bad.
Yes. And it was a lot of, well, I want to have sex, so you have to have sex with me. Yeah. Or there was no saying no. It was a very controlling relationship. It was very, if you don't answer this phone call in the next 5 minutes, then you don't love me and you don't want to be with me anymore. While we were fighting, it was picking a fight with me on the weekend so we could go out and party, and then the next day after he had sex with somebody else, come crawling back crying, saying he wanted to die without me. And it was a lot of very repetitive, ridiculous sounding behavior now looking back at it.
Yeah. So did he know about you trying to commit suicide, or was that after you guys broke up? Or
we broke up in 2016.
Oh, okay.
So he didn't know what had happened for the longest time. After we had broken up, he had said multiple things to me about how, which was a lot of what kind of drove me to the point, about how Lucas would be better off if I wasn't around, or how I was better off dead. The things that he would say to me became my inner monologue of, well, you're worthless, you're a piece of shit, you're disgusting, you smell like any horrible, degrading thing that you could say to a person, he said to me on a near daily basis for 3 years leading up to me trying to kill myself. So at that point, when I was in the hospital, they diagnosed me as schizophrenic because I said there's a voice in my head on a loop that just tells me horrible things about myself 24/7.
Was it him?
It was my voice, but it was all his words.
Oh, yeah.
I touched it. It was my voice, but it was all his words. Everything that he had ever said to me was on a loop in my head 24/7.
Wow. So tell us a little bit about your son.
He is the best. He's a sweet boy. The most loving mama's boy you could ever imagine in your entire life. He loves superheroes. Hulk is his favorite. Hulk smash everything the color green. I actually just went shopping for his Easter basket, and I got everything green that I could find. He's going through a painting stage right now where we're painting everything and he's decorating and
Good luck with that.
I get washable paint, no worries.
Yeah.
Not my first time. So yeah, I got him a bunch of arts and crafts and stuff like that. He's gonna have a ball. He's the best kid ever.
How do you go about maintaining a relationship with his dad? Does his dad come get him every now and then?
Well, his dad currently is not allowed to speak to me. I have it court ordered to where he has to talk to me through a court supervised app, which he refuses to download. It's been probably a year now that I've had his phone number blocked because of all the things that he would say to me. Because I did take him back to court last year after a bunch of really horrible incidents involving my son happened. I wanted to have him supervised with my son at all times because of a lot of things that had happened. So he and I don't speak. His number is blocked. I talk to his mom if I need to talk to him. We did briefly for about a year or so talk through my mom, but it got to the point where he would cuss my mom out and he had threatened to run over my mom's dog at one point and various other things. So my mom was like, you know what, like I cannot be this middle person anymore. So we've unfortunately put the burden on his mom, but it has been so much better for my own mental health and my mom's mental health because now she doesn't have to hear about what a crazy bitch her daughter is all the time. So we don't talk a lot. When I pick Lucas up, I just pretty much grab him and go. He doesn't have a driver's license or a car or really anything right now because he hasn't had a steady job in probably 2 years. About 2 years ago, he got fired from Union Tank. At the time, he was abusing meth, and he has kind of been on a downhill spiral ever since. So he does not pick up my son ever. He's not actually supposed to drive with my son in the car.
Right. But his mother does get your son, and then he gets to spend time with your son after that?
Yes.
Are you worried about your son being around him, knowing some of the things that you know about him, how he treated you, some of the abuse that he put you through?
I am, and it sucks to say this, but Lucas is used to it. This has been his normal for his whole life, almost 7 years now. Luckily, at this point, the mental abuse that my son has to go through is more things like Lucas being told contradictory things, things that don't always make sense. Sometimes it's things about me. But Lucas is smart and he knows. He only sees his dad every other weekend and once through the week. His dad doesn't come to wrestling, never came to baseball, he doesn't show up. And when Lucas does spend time with his dad, he's given a tablet and told basically to go play the tablet. He's not made to so much as brush his teeth at his dad's house. So he barely ever eats dinner at his dad's house. So he's very independent, I feel like, when he's over there, and he gets into his own little world. And that's his way of probably dissociating from everything that's going on.
Yeah. So how are you now mentally? Do you have any thoughts of suicide or anything like that anymore?
No, I will never ever get to that point again.
What do you think it is that finally brought you up out of that?
Being able to talk about what had happened. Very much so. It's a very heavy thing to carry for 7 years by yourself.
I would imagine so.
So once I got it out of my system, I'm medicated. I see a therapist. I cannot recommend all of that any more than possible. It saved my life. Prozac saved my life. Yeah. I would not be here without it.
That's awesome. Glad to hear you're doing better. So, what would you say to someone that experienced a similar situation that you did at that house party, being raped, and then getting in an abusive relationship, thinking about committing suicide? What would you say to a person that's going through similar things like that?
The thing that I thought was the dumbest piece of advice anyone ever gave me back in the day said it gets better. It takes a lot of time, and you can't heal if you don't talk about it. Talking is how you heal emotional and mental wounds, because your brain has to heal like your body does if you break a bone. If you go through trauma, your brain is broken and you have to talk about it. You have to heal one way or another. In abusive relationships, the thing I've tried to live with as a piece of advice for myself or anybody is, if it's not good enough for your best friend, if you have a child and it is not a good enough relationship for your child to be in, it is not a good enough relationship for you. You are your own best friend. You deserve everything that you think everyone else deserves. And if someone can't respect you enough to be kind to you and to do the bare minimum, especially in the first 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years, they'll never, ever be able to give you what you need, and you will never be happy. And especially when you have a child, what relationship it is that you portray to your child is the relationship they're going to grow up to have. I would rather be alone and show Lucas a strong, independent parent than what else he may see anywhere else.
Absolutely. I ask you guys to get in front of these cameras and talk about a bunch of personal stuff. You make yourself super vulnerable. I know it's not easy to talk about being raped. You held on to that and kept it to yourself for a very long time before you talked to anybody. What gave you the courage to come here and show this to everybody else and let them hear your story?
I made a Facebook status about it a couple of years ago. And the amount of love and outpouring support I received from everybody was insane. What was even more insane were the amount of girls messaging me saying, something very similar like this happened to me too. And I never told anybody about it. You're the first person I've ever told about it. And it made me realize that we have such a stigma on rape where it's the woman's fault. And it's, this happened to you, so this makes you bad. This makes you dirty. This makes you unattractive, unwantable, all that kind of stuff. When it's the opposite. You come out of the other side a different person, but that's sometimes a good thing. I never would have been able to do half the things I've done with my life had I kept being that sweet, shy, innocent little girl. That doesn't make what happened to me right, but it was part of my growth. And I want to show other women, other men that have been in that situation that it's not your fault. You did nothing wrong. The other person did something wrong. They took something from you, but you can take it back and you can grow and you can become stronger and you can eventually maybe get into my position where it's hard to talk about, but it feels good to talk about it, and you help other people throughout doing it.
How eye-opening was that so many people reached out and had similar situations? Because I'm sure there for a while, especially being that young, you might think that you're alone. Mm-hmm. And there aren't a lot of girls that's happened to, so you didn't think there was many people that you could talk to about it because they couldn't relate. So how eye-opening was that to find out that there were so many more?
It was, you don't feel alone. Yeah. It's way more common than anybody could ever imagine. Like, I cannot express to you how often it happens. And I think that rape's not something that we talk about enough in today's society, because it's more than just force. It's more than just holding somebody down or drugging them and forcing them to do it. It's coercing them and not taking no for an answer and begging pushing and pushing and pushing until eventually, sometimes 2 hours later, they say yes. And it's not because they want to, it's because they're scared. It's because they are being forced to do it. They're afraid that you'll hurt them if you don't. They're afraid that, something bad will happen if they don't do it. And for a man, it's one and done, it's over with. But for a woman, we carry that with us. Yeah. And I just want other women to know, like, you are not alone. This happens to 1 in 4 women. 25% of women have been sexually assaulted in their lifetime, even if they don't ever come forward about it or tell anybody.